Friends, welcome back my YouTube channel. If you want to watch the super hit movie The Accountant 2 in full HD, then first of all, give this video a like, and if you are visiting our channel for the first time, then subscribe to this channel. The name of the movie we are going to discuss in today's video is The Accountant 2, so we will give you information about how and where you will get to watch The Accountant 2 film officially. Apart from this, we will give you a detailed look at the pre-production, post-production, budget, box office collection, and filming of this movie. A detailed review of the movie will also be given in this video, where we will explain the story of this movie in detail. We will also discuss the cast and casting performance of the movie. Apart from this, information about the music department and technical department will also be given. Because of this video is going to be very interesting and entertaining. So, you must watch this video till the end. And if you haven't liked this video yet, then like this video now and subscribe to this channel. So, let's start the video. The Accountant 2 is a 2025 American action thriller film directed by Gavin O'Connor and written by Bill Dubuque. It is the sequel to The Accountant 2016. Ben Affleck, Jon Bernthal, Cynthia Addai-Robinson, and J.K. Simmons reprised their roles from the previous film, with Daniela Pineda joining the cast. Filming for The Accountant 2 took place from March to August of 2024. It premiered at the South by Southwest Festival on March 8, 2025, and was theatrically released on April 25, 2025 in the United States by Amazon MGM Studios through Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer and internationally by the original film's domestic distributor, Warner Bros. Pictures. The film has grossed over $103 million worldwide on a budget of $80 million and received generally positive reviews from critics, with some considering it an improvement over its predecessor. A sequel is also in development. Plot: former FinCEN director Raymond King meets with the mysterious assassin Anais to ask her help locating a Salvadorian family, offering only a dated photo of the parents and their young son. Anais does not respond to the offer, but warns King he has been followed. King is killed in the ensuing gunfight while Anais walks away unscathed. King's protege and current director of FinCEN, Mary Beth Medina, identifies his body, sees "Find the Accountant" written on his arm, and decides to take up the case. Medina, despite being mistrustful of Christian Wolf's illegal activities, asks him for help finding the family in the photo. Wolf organizes a collage of information which shows that the family in the photo fled from El Salvador to Los Angeles, encountering various hazards along the way. Cobb, the man tasked with killing Anais and King, informs his supervisor Burke, who tells him to continue pursuing Anais, lest she realize what Burke did to her. Christian invites his estranged brother, Braxton, still an assassin, to help with the case. Justine, still residing at the New Hampshire compound where she met Christian, works with a group of autistic children to hack into different technologies to help Christian. Their group manages to find a photo of Anais, but are unable to identify her. Uncomfortable with their illegal methods, Medina breaks from the group. She visits a hospital mentioned in one of King's reports, where she discovers Anais is actually the mother from the photo. Anais was earlier involved in a car accident, causing brain damage, loss of memory, and acquired savant syndrome, which includes intense combat skills. Batu, a contractor for hitmen, sets a contract for Medina, which Braxton rejects. Wolf later sees the message on Braxton's phone, realizes there is a hit on Medina, and arrives after she has been wounded by Anais. At Medina's, Anais sees the old photo of her family and regains some of her memories, discovering that Burke was the one who had imprisoned her and murdered her husband in Juarez. Braxton and Christian realize that Anais' still living autistic son, Alberto, is being held captive at a prison camp in Juarez with other children of trafficking victims, separated from their families. They assault the compound and manage to save Alberto and the rest of the children after killing Cobb and the other guards. Justine blackmails Batu into canceling his contract on Medina. Justine tips off Anais to Burke's hiding spot, and she kills him. Justine and the gifted children prepare to welcome Alberto to their facility in New Hampshire, and Braxton and Christian discuss going on a brotherly hiking trip. Cast Ben Affleck as Christian Wolfe, an autistic accountant and trained killer. Jon Bernthal as Braxton, Christian's estranged brother and a professional hitman. Cynthia Addai-Robinson as Mary Beth Medina, Deputy Director of the Treasury Department's FinCEN. Daniela Pineda as Anais, an amnesiac assassin and the missing Salvadoran mother. Allison Robertson as Justine, computerized voice provided by Allison Wright, Christian's non-speaking autistic business partner at Harbor Neuroscience. Robert Morgan as Burke, a criminal mastermind behind the trafficking operation. J.K. Simmons as Raymond King, the former director of FinCEN who launches the search for the Salvadorian family. Grant Harvey as Cobb, Burke's enforcer and King's assassin. Andrew Howard as Batu, a contractor who arranges assassination contracts. Lombardo Boyar as Thomas, one of the thugs in Burke's trafficking operation. Michael Turek as Ixudio, owner of a pizza factory in Burke's trafficking operation. Production. In June 2017, a sequel to The Accountant was announced to be in development, with Ben Affleck set to reprise his role and Bill Dubuque and Gavin O'Connor returning to write and direct, respectively. By February 2020, Affleck confirmed that developments were ongoing, with the studio having considered retroactively turning a separate script into The Accountant 2. He also expressed interest in a potential television series. In September 2021, O'Connor confirmed that a sequel was in development, with a possibility of a third entry. Affleck and Jon Bernthal were confirmed to reprise their roles as Christian Wolfe and Brax. In February 2024, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer acquired the distribution rights from Warner Bros. Pictures, with an estimated $10 million in qualified spending and tax incentives. Warner Bros. Will remain involved as the film's international distributor. In March 2024, J.K. Simmons and Cynthia Addai-Robinson were also announced to be returning, with Daniela Pineda, Allison Robertson, Robert Morgan, and Grant Harvey joining the cast. Principal photography began on March 25, 2024 in California, with Seamus McGarvey returning as cinematographer. Filming wrapped on August 16, 2024. Bryce Dessner composed the score, replacing Mark Isham, who scored the original film. Release. The film premiered at South by Southwest on March 8, 2025, and was theatrically released in the United States by Amazon MGM Studios and internationally by Warner Bros. Pictures on April 25, 2025. Advanced screenings of the film took place on April 15, 2025, in honor of Tax Day. After a month and a half, it was released on Amazon Prime Video on June 5, 2025. Reception. Box office. As of June 8, 2025, The Accountant 2 has grossed $65.5 million in the United States and Canada and $37.7 million in other territories, for a worldwide total of $103.2 million. In the United States and Canada, The Accountant 2 was released alongside Until Dawn, the wide expansion of The Legend of Ochi, and the re-release of Star Wars Episode the Third, Revenge of the Sith, and was projected to gross $25 million from 3,610 theaters in its opening weekend. It made $9.4 million on its first day, including $2.5 million from preview screenings. The film went on to debut to $24.5 million, finishing third behind Holdover Sinners and Revenge of the Sith. It made $9 million in its second weekend, a drop of 61%. Then $6.7 million in its third, just a 29% decrease. Finishing in fourth both times. Critical response. On the review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, 76% of 207 critics' reviews are positive, with an average rating of 6.2 to 10. The website's consensus reads, improving on the original by leaning into Ben Affleck and Jon Bernthal's buddy comedy chemistry, The Accountant 2 can safely be filed under a good time at the movies. Metacritic, which uses a weighted average, assigned the film a score of 58 out of 100 based on 42 critics, indicating mixed or average reviews. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of A on an A+ to F scale, while 68% of those surveyed by PostTrack said they would definitely recommend it. In September 2021, director Gavin O'Connor announced plans to turn The Accountant into a trilogy, describing the third film as a buddy film he called Rain Man on steroids. In April 2025, O'Connor confirmed that the third film is in development and will focus on Christian and Braxton in a road trip format, with a lighter tone and more emotional depth. Anna Kendrick is expected to return as Dana Cummings. Ben Affleck has also expressed interest in completing the trilogy, deeming the film's layered structure and character development to be strengths for it. The core of what works about The Accountant 2 recalls buddy action movies from the 80s, flicks that put together two likable stars in polar opposite character types and then just let the sparks fly. In this case, Ben Affleck almost literally plays the brain to Jon Bernthal's brawn, and the pair of likable performers have fantastic chemistry, conveying that love-hate thing that is exclusively a sibling dynamic. When they are allowed to riff off each other, such as in an excellent scene on the roof of Affleck's Sunstream, the movie hums off their energy. The problem is everything else. The Accountant 2 does set an interesting table. Years after the action of the first film, it's almost impossible to believe it's been almost a decade between films. Raymond King, J.K. Simmons, left FinCEN for PI work and has followed the clues around the disappearance of a family of 3 to some very dark and dangerous places. He's meeting with a mysterious woman named Anais, Daniela Pineda, but she's not the issue. That's the armed men in the building and outside it. Are they there for King? Anais? Both? After a well-staged bathroom fight, King ends up the victim of a sniper shot in the street, but not before he has time to scrawl something on his arm. Find the accountant. The message meets its intended target at the morgue. Mary Beth Medina, Cynthia Addai-Robinson, a treasury agent who works to hunt down Christian Wolf, aka the accountant, Affleck. Wolf looks at King's wall of evidence and starts to connect dots that no one else can see. And here's where Bill Dubuque's script starts to collapse in on itself. The mystery at the core of The Accountant 2 is impossible to care about, because the film never really defines its characters or stakes, using human trafficking and immigration problems in an exploitative way, instead of presenting viewers with a real villain or mystery to solve. Maybe Christian's hitman brother Braxton, Bernthal, can help? Once they're united, Christian, Braxton, and Medina barrel their way through the plot in a manner that produces too few surprises, twists, or sense of mystery. That's fine for some action films, but director Gavin O'Connor doesn't supplement the lack of interesting plotting with bang-bang action. There are a few well-structured scenes here, but nothing memorable on an action level, and the final shootout is particularly poorly choreographed. Dubuque and O'Connor spend a ludicrous amount of time at Harbor Neuroscience, where Christian has developed a team of young people like him who can hack into any phone and even alter the traffic lights so they can get the job done. It's almost funny to think about the amount of off-the-books murder to which these special kids have been an accomplice. Here's where fans of these films will argue that this critic is taking the film too seriously, and I did question why I give admittedly silly films like the Den of Thieves flicks a pass, but couldn't stop yawning during this one. Suspension of disbelief is a funny thing that way. If we're overwhelmed by action or even just in love with character and sometimes even setting, we can put aside things like a complete lack of an engaging villain or neurodivergent child murderers. Sometimes just an abundance of personality or style can push aside the nagging questions that drag a film like this one down. The truth is that pacing often trumps realism, and The Accountant 2 just doesn't build enough momentum. I think one of the reasons for that is that O'Connor is far more interested in the brother-buddy comedy than the human trafficking action film, and never quite figures out how to blend the two. The film about two very different brothers who try to bridge the chasm of personality between them almost completely works. Everything else? Total hokum. Merging the two becomes an assignment too difficult for even the accountant to decipher. Plot. Christian Wolff applies his brilliant mind and illegal methods to reconstruct the unsolved puzzle of a treasury chief's murder. Review. I'm glad I watched the original Accountant the other day, as I hadn't seen it since it came out nearly a decade ago. This belated sequel has returning characters that I would have completely forgotten about if I hadn't revisited it. So if you haven't seen the first movie recently, I'd give it a rewatch before seeing this. I'd been wondering why this sequel was announced after so long, as really, why bother? I have to say though, I'm glad they did, as this surpasses the first film in every way. The Accountant 2 has a sharper script, better pacing, and Jon Bernthal and Ben Affleck are arguably the best buddy pairing since Riggs and Murtaugh. I was expecting a more generic movie than it is, and sure, there are familiar aspects to the story, but the character of Christian Wolff is becoming one of my favorite modern-day action movie protagonists. I remember saying this when I saw the first film, that I love the idea that someone with a disability is almost more of a superhero, and it totally works. The relationship between the siblings Braxton, Bernthal, and Wolff, Affleck, is where we get the humor and heart, with Braxton just wanting a normal relationship with his brother. But due to Chris's condition, he struggles to keep in touch. This causes various scenes of brotherly banter with some surprisingly hilarious moments. I can't remember the last time I had so much fun at a movie theater, and I can't wait for the already greenlit third movie. I'd watch these guys just doing a road trip and enjoying seeing them chat while Braxton tries to understand his brother. There is, of course, plenty of action. I found the first movie took a while to get going, but this starts off with a bang, rarely goes too long without a fight or shootout. The final half hour is when the action gets crazy, with Bernthal channeling his inner Frank Castle while he and his brother take out the trash. There is the odd, mild pacing issue, but maybe this just caught me in a rare, good mood. I even enjoyed the character moments and wasn't wishing they'd hurry up and get to the action. The Accountant 2 review. Ben Affleck may have given up Batman, but he's not done with superheroes. In the 2016 film The Accountant, Affleck played Christian Wolff, one of many aliases for an autistic mathematical savant who worked as a forensic accountant and money launderer for every stripe of black money organization. A plethora of confusing or outright sad flashbacks served as his superhero origin story. A cold military psyop father trained Chris, bullied for his difference and struggling with tantrums, and his neurotypical brother to become lethal fighting machines. The film, written by Bill Dubuque, co-creator of Netflix's Ozark, treated Chris's neurodivergence as a superpower, the key to exceptional skill in all fields. A noble intention, though one squandered by the misanthropic stupidity of everything around it. In practice, Chris was a pretty standard-issue movie assassin, and The Accountant a solid but overly complicated and forgettable action movie that did not need nor set up a second chapter. Nevertheless, business persists. Like another simple favor, this year's SXSW opening night premiere film, The Accountant 2, is a long gestating sequel from Amazon MGM Studios to a modest 2010s movie co-starring Anna Kendrick that performed well outside of theaters. The Accountant was low-key the most rented movie of 2017 in the US, gaining a relatively loyal, if quiet, following. And also, like Another Simple Favor, The Accountant 2 is not so much a redux as fan service that leans into the inherent ridiculousness of the enterprise. The Accountant 2, which reunites Dubuque with director Gavin O'Connor, is an even more convoluted, impenetrable, outlandish spectacle of male hypercompetence than its predecessor, doubling down on what one might call divorced dad camp. That's mostly for the better. The Accountant 2 is a more fun affair than The Accountant if you're a fan of very loud shoot-'em-ups, nonsensical crime webs, and rogue good guys fighting obviously very bad guys. Though this outing is sadly missing Anna Kendrick. Her Dana, Chris's erstwhile accounting accomplice, romantic interest, is presumably living well outside Chicago. Chris, meanwhile, has spent the intervening 8 years. The sequel was in development for at least 6, keeping to himself in his airstream of black market alternative payments. He's still receiving arrangements from his handler, Justine, Allison Robertson, a nonverbal autistic savant based at the Harbor Neuroscience Treatment Center in New Hampshire, but mostly laying low in Boise. Chris gets back in the action game, however, at the call of Mary Beth Medina, Cynthia Addai-Robinson, a former ally of sorts from the Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Office, who all inexplicably have guns and combat training. The death of someone close to both plunges them into an investigation that involves, in no particular order, an organized crime network based out of a fish shop, Central American human trafficking gangs, the cruelties of the migrant journey from El Salvador to Texas, a series of high-profile hits around the world, one missing autistic youth in Juarez, and an elusive assassin known as Anais, Daniela Pineda. I'm not explaining more for the sake of spoilers, and because I genuinely could not follow the labyrinthine and, once again, poorly integrated plot. But suffice to say, it's both a lot and inconsequential. The plot is not the point. The point is that Chris calls on his estranged hitman brother Braxton, Jon Bernthal, for assistance, allowing for the film's chief pleasure, 2 macho actors chopping it up as brothers who don't know how to be brothers. Just 2 lifelong loners, no partners, no kids, no friends, no dependents, wondering if they're happy. The Accountant had an air of overweening self-seriousness to its proceedings, occasionally leavened by Chris's inability to read social cues, with Affleck's performance of neurodivergence boiling down to just avoiding eye contact. The sequel attempts more good-natured humor, laughing with Chris's idiosyncrasies, hacking a dating algorithm but struggling with the dates, figuring out how to line dance, continually surprising people with his Clark Kent-style pocket protector to action hero reveal. Affleck still plays Chris as a slightly more socially awkward version of an unflappable movie assassin. Bernthal, who played Braxton in the first movie with a sort of impenetrable worldly panache, goes fully off the chain, chewing every scene as a hitman of supreme confidence and desperate vulnerability who cannot sit still. Not exactly continuous, but highly watchable. Together, the pair carry what could and nearly does devolve into an illegible pursuit of indecipherable crime under a hail of gunfire. All that, plus an Avengers-esque hub of teenage autistic savants using their special abilities to outwit and out-data hunt everyone else. That's my people, says Chris. I wouldn't necessarily call it progressive to show neurodivergent youth hacking through every privacy law imaginable in the name of ability. But it is a nice sentiment of inclusion. The film casts many autistic actors for the roles, and a gesture at celebrating difference. Though, of course, that difference only skews in favor of extreme skills. Still, sentiment aside, This is a movie of cinematic adrenaline and ludicrous setups, ironically for its hero, stupid pleasures, but the fun kind of stupid, the kind that draws loud cheers from a crowd at a SXSW premiere and gets people streaming on the couch. It's neither groundbreaking nor exceptional, but it does deliver above the admittedly low bar for a questionable sequel, with enough juice for another at-home hit. The Accountant 2's title is stylized as The Accountant, which I guess you would read aloud as The Accountant Squared, and that's an accurate description of the follow-up, a movie that multiplies the 2016 original by a factor of itself. The relationship between the two features reminds me of how The Terminator, 1984, was a straightforward affair, while Terminator 2, Judgment Day, 1991, turned the original on its head, injecting humor and heart into an almost self-parodying sequel. Ben Affleck's autistic math whiz and CPA, Christian Wolff, who is skilled in combat and also earns millions by handling the books of various organized crime factions, becomes a kind-hearted and lovable character here. He's paired with his contract killer brother, Braxton, played by Jon Bernthal, in a far more substantial role than before. Together, they headline the sequel, raised to the second power as a veritable buddy comedy, albeit with an involved criminal plot and a few shootouts added for good measure. Despite becoming a surprise hit at the box office and bringing in over $150 million in receipts on a $44 million budget, The Accountant exhibited little cultural staying power. Personally, I hadn't thought about it until the sequel was announced. A serviceable but unfocused affair, the 2016 movie works better on the small screen. After giving the Gavin O'Connor-directed feature a mixed review, I rewatched it at home in preparation for the sequel, and it worked better with lowered expectations. The sequel makes the most of the nearly 9 years since the original, rethinking aspects from Affleck's performance to the overall tone and imbuing them with more specificity and playfulness. The result is a superior and more satisfying experience in every way. The story picks up with Christian living a comfortable life in his Airstream trailer in Boise, Idaho, where he plays with a toy lightsaber next to his priceless Picasso and a closet full of weaponry. Apparently looking for love, he attends the Boise Romance Festival, where he's gamed their algorithm to give himself a better chance at a love connection. Christian tells his potential dates that he doesn't believe in soulmates or true love, and he relies on statistics when he informs one woman in her 40s that she's an unlikely candidate for having children. The event is a disaster. It also sets the tone, chummy, funny, and winking at its concept. While the first installment had only hints of humor, this sequel brings it to the forefront. Even with the shift in tone, the plot barely registers. Raymond King, J.K. Simmons, now retired and working as a private eye, has been searching for a missing family whose fates involve sex traffickers, Central American prison camps, and a ruthless assassin. Upon his death, he urges Medina, Cynthia Addai-Robinson, now head of the Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Division, to contact Christian and carry on the investigation. Paired with Medina, Christian is the eccentric foil, like the Terminator was to John Connor. She even tries to convince him not to resort to violence, much like John Connor did with his cybernetic bodyguard. But next to Christian's boisterous brother, a walking chunk of machismo who soon arrives to assist. The titular hero becomes the straight man in a comic duo where Bernthal's Braxton is the wild card. While the investigation unfolds, Christian and Braxton's dynamic, given life by Affleck and Bernthal's charming brotherly chemistry, renders everything else about the movie secondary. Never mind that Christian does almost no accounting, or that the screenplay by Bill Dubuque treats the plot as an afterthought. The Accountant 2 is more interested in exploring its characters, suggesting that Dubuque, the co-creator of Netflix's Ozark, would rather be making a series than a sequel. Dubuque does expand on the mythology. For instance, If you wondered about the origins of Christian's British accented handler, the sequel fleshes out that idea. She belongs to a network of autistic children at a clandestine place called Harbor Neuroscience, who serve as Christian's personal surveillance, research, and tech team, playing an independently wealthy man who uses his riches to fund vigilante activities. Affleck's role is even more Batman-esque in the sequel, bringing to mind the moment when Affleck, playing Batman in 2017's Justice League, explains his superpower: "I'm rich." Affleck seems to be giving Christian more affectations, this time including a heightened monotone voice along with literalized and formal language. But it's a fuller performance, with notes of Christian changing, such as when he goes line dancing at a country bar in Los Angeles to impress an attractive woman. Even more entertaining is Bernthal, whose livewire energy as Braxton leads to amusing moments, such as a subplot about acquiring a pet, including a hilarious sequence where he's out-negotiated by a corgi breeder. Beneath the surface, The Accountant 2 showcases how people with autism can have jobs, relationships, and, in many ways, learn skills that might seem superhuman to those without the condition. Take that, Mr. Secretary of Health and Human Services. And, while I couldn't explain how every plot development comes together, I had fun watching Affleck and Bernthal's sibling antics, which are funny and heartfelt. O'Connor continues to direct with no particular visual style, further suggesting this material might be suited for television, but he delivers an exciting shoot-'em-up climax. The sequel takes more risks than the sometimes bland original, and in that, it accomplishes more. The Accountant 2 is the second chapter in director Gavin O'Connor's proposed trilogy of movies about Ben Affleck's genius money-laundering accountant on the autism spectrum, Christian Wolff. The Accountant was released in 2016 to instant critical and commercial acclaim and was a certified box office success for Studio Warner Brothers. Both Ben Affleck and Jon Bernthal gave career highlight performances as Christian and Braxton Wolff, and the ending left audiences with a demand for more. The sequel to The Accountant has been on the cards for several years. Gavin O'Connor returned to direct, with both Affleck and Bernthal back again, to lead the cast in a story that will feature the latter much more than the previous installment. The Wolff brothers duo was one of the strongest aspects of The Accountant, and they are the focus of the sequel's plot. Though it took almost a decade for the much-anticipated sequel to finally arrive, The Accountant 2 builds upon the successes of its predecessor. The action genre is known for its over-the-top excitement and nonsensical storytelling, and it seems as if The Accountant 2's biggest flaws have gotten a pass from critics. The Guardian praised the sequel by saying it was more fun than its predecessor because it took bigger swings, while Vulture echoed those sentiments by mentioning the film shouldn't be taken seriously. On the other hand, Roger Ebert took the opposite view of the film, saying it was so devoid of seriousness that it failed to deliver the basics of good filmmaking. On the money side of things, The Accountant 2 got out to a strong start, but it still has a long way to go before it can be considered a financial success. With a reported budget of around $80 million via Collider, the film's $37 million opening weekend via Box Office Mojo is strong, but will need to keep momentum to make money. When factoring in the movie's marketing and advertising costs, as well as the theater's share of the profits, the movie has only made about a quarter of its money back in its first weekend. The cast of The Accountant 2 is headlined by Ben Affleck and Jon Bernthal in their roles from The Accountant. In the 2016 movie, Affleck played the titular forensic accountant Christian Wolff, while Bernthal played his brother, the hitman Braxton. Along with those two, J.K. Simmons reprised his role as Financial Crimes Enforcement Network Director Ray King, though his death is the catalyst of the sequel. Meanwhile, Cynthia Addai-Robinson also returned as Treasury Agent Mary Beth Medina, who joins the Wolff brothers on their mission. Daniela Pineda, Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, appeared as Annius, alongside Robert Morgan, Hacksaw Ridge, as Burke, and Grant Harvey, Animal Kingdom, as Cobb. Finally, Andrew Howard, Echo, was tapped to play the role of Batu. With the movie's release date looming, the full trailer for The Accountant 2 was dropped in February 2025. Opening with Christian attempting to readjust back to life after the first movie, the trailer then quickly reveals that Ray King has been murdered by shady figures. This brings Christian on the case as he teams up with Mary Beth to find out who murdered Ray and why. Along the way, they loop in Christian's long-lost brother, Braxton, who brings a certain amount of firepower to their battle with the underworld criminals. Another full trailer for The Accountant 2 arrived in April 2025, and it shows off even more of the action-packed sequel. The 3-minute tease opens with Christian attending a speed dating event, but he's confronted after it's revealed he manipulated the algorithm. The trailer then gets down to business as it's revealed that Ray has been murdered and Mary Beth asks Christian for help. The elder Wolf brother then turns to his brother Braxton, and the duo hunt for Ray's killers. The Accountant 2 was a typical action film in that it took few risks and delivered plenty of big moments in the process. The ending of the sequel was also not particularly surprising, and left the audience with no questions following the epic Wolf brothers team-up. While a sequel wasn't explicitly teased, the openness of the movie's concept means that the Wolf brothers could return for any number of adventures in future installments. There's less backstory here than in the first movie, which revisited Christian's brutal childhood and his adurted violence skill set, then frees up the filmmakers like the first movie. This was written by Bill Dearbuke and directed by Gavin O'Connor to focus on keeping all the people and parts nicely moving among these, is Affleck, whose controlled inward directed performance holds the center, one irresistible draw of a diversion. Like this is that while its good guys are often bad, its bad guys are assuredly worse. Both Christian and, especially Braxton, have obvious moral failings, but their kill counts are never the problem, which puts them in fine, crowded company. American movies love gunslingers after all, whether they have Texas or British accents, wear white hats or gray ones, like Christian among. These are the seemingly ordinary men, a blue-collar types next-door dads, computer jockeys, a who when hard push comes to brutal shove, comes to catastrophic violence will take off. Their glasses a till. The lock-kin to transform into near-mystically gifted Avengers. They lock and load, restoring order to a broken world. That may say something about American violence, gun culture, contemporary masculinity, what have you. Mostly, it suggests that filmmakers and audiences have an insatiable appetite for entertainments that dispense with the niceties of civilization. Judge, jury, and trial included in the name of civilization. Like many other rampaging heroic outlaws, Christian practices a kind of extreme, frontier justice that no one but Mary Beth Phoebe protests in this first movie. Christian and Braxton's history, they were raised by a sadistic military psychologist. He offered the wispiest of explanations for how they became the violent men they did in the sequel. Another family's tragedy becomes the excuse for regenerative carnage. There's no point in detailing what else happens, and why, and whether everything makes sense. It doesn't, and it doesn't matter. All that counts in The Accountant 2 is that it's adroitly paced unburdened by narrative logic. There are almost as many coincidences as corpses and buoyed by its well-synced charismatic leads Affleck and Burnt. Chemistry is palpable, and it's enjoyable watching how comfortably they fit together, whether they're making like Butch and the Sundance Kid or leaning into Abbott and Costello. Absurdism in one scene, Christian and Braxton sit in side-by-side chairs, facing in opposite directions, shooting the breeze. Just a couple of guys looking out on a world that they'll soon paint red. The Accountant 2, a sequel to the 2016 original, doesn't Peter Bernthal Eka in spandex with a giant A on his chest, but it comes pretty close when he's done using his math and pattern recognition skills to fight for justice. He starts methodically mowing down baddies with assault weaponry, even rescuing children from a disaster on a school bus. And once you get past the "how the hell did this get made?" questions, you will likely find yourself enjoying this extremely entertaining movie. Don't worry if you don't remember the first one to LA, or if you never got around to it. Indeed, returning director Gavin. No Connor and Affleck seem eager to take the more saleable points of the character as neurotypical skills and ditch the moody dramatic parts. So, no more talk about dad issues or yearning to fit in. And Thea Anna Kendrick, a love interest angle, is gone. This leaves room for more action and comedy, like the accountant using his algorithmically sensitive brain to hack a speed dating session. Honestly, I would not be surprised if Affleck hasn't watched footage of the first film in years. Evidence of that is how the character's voice has changed from a German monotone to more Veresque caricature. It's entirely possible that people in the autism community will find this portrayal a little offensive also. Some did with the first, but at least from where I'm sitting, the accountant is pretty cool. He still goes by Christian Wolf, one of his many mathematics-based aliases, and when we meet up with him again, he's living in his Airstream trailer, fumed with priceless works of art, heavy weaponry, and drawers full of cash. He is still in touch with Justine. His computer was partnered with nonverbal autism, who communicates by computer. Yet he seems to be on a hiatus from working as a forensic accountant for villains, then secretly feeding info to good guys to get them busted. But when his old buddy, Rick King, J.K. Simmons, the retired head of the Treasury Department's police force, ends up dead, the new head, Marie Beth Medina, Cynthia Addai-Robinson, sends out her version of the bad signal. At first, her job is to be a wide-eyed audience surrogate and ask Wolf a bunch of questions as he begins sleuthing in his unorthodox manner. And unless you know what the EB stands for, you'll be glad she does. Willie the Accountant. 2A is just another mob-based thriller. It does have a nice layer of tax. No babble on top of it. Which I'll take on faith is accurate, luckily for Addai-Robinson, and for us, O'Connor and returning writer Bill Dubuque are quick to reunite the accountant with his brother Braxton, Jon Bernthal, an emotionally clingy contract killer. That's when the movie slips into a groove of envelope-pushing, violent comedy. Byrne lays the ridiculous loose cannon. Addai-Robinson wants things done by the book, and Affleck is annoyed by both of them as he tries to stay focused on solving the puzzle. He has an ace up his sleeve with his ill-gotten fortune. He's been funding the New Hampshire boarding school for neurodivergent youth, introduced in the first movie, led by Justine. These kids are elite computer hackers, and the montage sequences of them blasting through firewalls and plucking passwords from the cloud are thrilling. This level of filigree, along with burnless manic performance, is enough to distract you from the utter inscrutability of the plot. I have actually seen of the account in 2A twice, and I still have no idea what the hell the bad guys are doing. All I know is that the head bad guy, Robert Morgan, runs what gives every impression of being a successful seafood market, in addition to being involved in smuggling. What's with these people? Why not just sell fish? There's a whole scene devoted to how much money he makes on tuna. Who in their right mind jeopardizes a successful business with all kinds of cartel nonsense? I'll never understand criminals, I guess. Anyway, the mafiosa plot introduces an additional contract killer, Daniela Pineda, whose troubled past triggered an extreme case of acute Savin syndrome. In other words, she got bonked on the head and now is the Terminator. I am happy to report that of the Accountant 2A does not fully exploit What would happen if Wolf Braxton and she were to team up, leaving me salivating for The Accountant? 3AA, devising such a movie may push everyone to their limits, however. The ludicrousness on display here is enormous. I haven't even gotten to The Accountant using his analysis skills to hack the art of line dancing, but it's interesting how Affleck, a two-time loser at the superhero genre, ended up finding his best action-adventure character is John Wick with this franchise somehow. The numbers all add up. In 1984, The Terminator became one of the pop culture touchstone of its decade. Though it's almost hard to remember that when Arnold Schwarzenegger was first tapped to portray that lowering cybernetic killer, the casting was a knowing joke, one that played off Arnold's borderline Kit Lunkishness as an actor. It's not a compliment exactly to say that you were born to play a cyborg. Beneful Ika is a far better actor than Schwarzenegger, but 9 years ago, when Affleck was cast as the title character in The Accountant, the role carried some of that same pre-own of metal japery Affleck as winning. Canby has often had a blockish, overly square, slightly inexpressive quality, and it's precisely that aspect of his personality that makes him so perfect as Christian Wolf, an autistic savant who works as an accountant for mobsters and terrorists, using his surreal numbers acumen to clean up their fraudulent books. He is also, not so incidentally, an efficient action bruiser. You could say, in the broadest sense, that The Accountant was a Jason B-born thriller with Brain Man at its center. But that wouldn't do justice to the submerged wit of Affleck's performance, or to the even better one he gives in The Accountant 2, which premiered tonight, SXSW, speaking in a low, flat monotone with facial expressions that range from blank to blanker. He's a lot more plugged in than Dustin Hoffman's character in Rain Man. But Christian's personality is limited by the fact that the only way he knows how to communicate is by spouting objective information. That's what he thinks a conversation is within that way of being. He's a rather personable, stoic brainiac, but it's that naggingly neutral equality afflict as emotional android day that shapes Christian's prowess as an action hero. He's empathy impaired. This allows him to inflict pain. As much as I enjoyed Affleck in The Accountant, the movie itself was a rather dismal mess. The director Gavin O'Connor tried to stage it with a quirky humanity, but the script by Bill Dubuque was all over the place, as if it had been fed through a shredder. So going into The Accountant 2, I pondered the silver lining of it all. To me, this franchise had nowhere to go but up, and that, I'm pleased to say, is exactly what happened. The Accountant 2 is an agreeably loopy, hyper-violent good time. O'Connor is back in the director's chair, and the screenplay, once again, is by the Dubuque, who has a knack, if you can call it that, for writing scenes that sprawl and meander to the point that you're half enjoying them and half scratching your head going, what is the goddamn point of this? That aspect of his writing drove me nuts in The Accountant. This time, it has resulted in something as entertainingly pulpy as, it is unlikely The Accountant 2 is one of the only thrillers I've seen you could characterize as a hangout movie. The plot has something to do with Mary Beth Medina, Cynthia Addai-Robinson, now a deputy in the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, trying to save a family of Central American refugees, a session of her boss Raymond King, J.K. Simmons, when he is gunned down in the baffling but logistically exciting opening set piece. Who is the effectless blonde with black panetta who arrives to meet him? This will be answered down the line by some John Wick world building. But even when you finally figured out what's going on, don't expect to be overly invested in the outcome. Mary Beth teams up with Christian, who is still living in his silver Pan American Airstream RV. It's the only space his automaton imagination needs. He uses his acumen to narrow down the search, even as the scenes slam into each other like slow-motion bumper cars. It's Fun to see Christian do his strikeout version of speed dating, or survey a bunch of photographs and tax forms to parse clues that would be invisible to anyone else. And when he and Murray Beth visit the crooked head of a pizza company that once employed the immigrant mom, Christian bedazzles and befuddles the sleaze by figuring out based on his most popular pizza aide that he's money laundering. He then twists the guy's arm out of its sack to get the information he needs. Can we really call it sadism if our hero, unlike, say, Jason Statham, takes no pleasure in it? He's just doing what objectively works. There's no way that they were going to make an accountant movie without Braxton Christian's brother, who is, like his more reckless counterpart, has a not autistic boat. 2. Jon Bernthal, with that lure of arrogance, his hair standing up thick and high enough to make him seem like Affleck's bad seat twin, plays Braxton as if he could be on the spectrum. These two become a dark side comedy team, the sociopath and the numbers cruncher, when Braxton launches a plan that involves inviting a trio of sex workers into a motel room. The connection to the central plot is so roundabout that you flirt with checking out of the movie, but give it time, and it all adds up. There's a team of autistic hackers who, in one of the cleverest scenes with each kid seated at a different computer, manipulate every screen and appliance in the home of a random stranger to retrieve the photograph she accidentally snapped of the blonde assassin. And the way that Assassin was created is a little movie unto itself, one having to do with acquired Savin syndrome, which as presented is pure sci-fi through it all. Christian is lonely, haunted by the lack of connection enforced by his personality, but he shows the beginnings of a way out of his trap in a crowd-pleasing scene, set at an LA honky-tonk bar stoked by a woman who comes over to flirt with him. He uses his observational skills to participate in a country dance, and the sight of Christian, the stoic numbers cruncher, finally letting loose makes you want to applaud. Most of The Accountant 2 is enjoyable in that way. The scene's poised between having a purpose and brashly killing time. But when the story reaches its rescue climax set in a children's compound in Juarez, it becomes a touch generic, less flaked out fun than the rest of the movie. That aside, The Accountant who establishes that it's now a franchise to reckon with. You can't tell from the way the title is stylized on screen, as is a mathematical exponent, like Alien Alba, that The Accountant 2 has removed the self-s seriousness from its predecessors' otherwise delightful formula. Gavin O'Connor's sequel is a blast building on the story and relationships of 2016's The Accountant, to reveal a touching, hilarious portrait of fraud brotherhood within a charged and politically relevant plot. All the while, it leans full tilt into a goofy setup that's executed with utter confidence. Christian Wolf Ben Affleck, aka The Accountant, is a savant number cruncher for the mob and part-time vigilante gunman whose autism is gently approached and realistically performed, but framed as though it were a superpower. There's less bean counting in The Accountant 2, but far more blood and bullets, starting with an opening scene in which former Financial Crimes Enforcement Network or Finansun director Raymond King J.K. Simmons is gunned down while working a case in secret once the Commissioner Gordon, to The Accountant's Batman fitting as Affleck and Simmons, have since played that dynamica in the DC Extended University. King has only been following leads in which he's emotionally invested. His death leaves behind an intricate puzzle for Wolf to solve, alongside King's Treasury Department successor, the returning Murray Beth Medina, Cynthia Addai-Robinson. The case that got King killed opens up a web of human trafficking between Central America and the southern U.S., exposing the ways in which undocumented immigrants who have little legal recourse are brutally exploited. Where the first film is mostly UNC sentimental about its central plot, which revolved around a robotics firm, The Accountant 2 conjures immense sympathy with its topical melodrama and the mystery of King's death. but as somber as the story seems at first blush. It's also peppered with wildly amusing moments of character that begins with Wolf's reintroduction, during which he games a speed dating algorithm by sprucing up his profile in all the right ways only to botch every face-to-face encounter. It's the perfect kind of silly, placing Wolf's isolation front and center while setting up his impending reunion with his estranged brother, fellow contract killer Braxton Jon Bernthal, whose help he seeks to solve King's murder. Also assisting Wolf is his returning remote technologically savvy assistant, Justine Allison Robertson, replacing Allison Rudd from the first film's nonverbal resident of a mansion-like academy for young autistic students. She has her own legion of hackers in training this time, A.Delaprof. Professor Riegze, who she even quotes at Divergence, constantly threatens to tip, but never fully does, into offensiveness. A mysterious, scarily capable assassin known only as Anna Ayild Diran as Daniela. Panetta seems to somehow be involved in King's case, but the accountant's lopsided structure ensures that she's single-minded character do retroactively justify those absences. After all, this is the kind of movie where no matter how many conveniences cause its jigsaw pieces to click into place, the result is no less entertaining. Just like the accountant whose heightened tone and reliance on tried-and-true storytelling devices is a enormous coincidences, long-lost family connections, wouldn't feel out of place in a Bollywood movie, the sequel similarly runs a crowd-pleasing gamut. The action is capable and clear. The plot, while complicated in structure, takes the characters to interesting places both geographically and emotionally. The comedy is fine-tuned, and most importantly, entirely character and performance-based things simmer on a medium flame until Burnt shows up and instantly sets the screen ablaze. An actor long compared to Robert Darrow, he finally gets his own "you talking to me" moment in The Accountant 2, which paves the path for Braxton's surprising vulnerability. He's a lost, lonely soul who just wants his older brother's friendship, Affleck. Despite a voice that seems more influenced by a Simpsons comic book this time around, returns seamlessly to the role of Wolf. Having retreated almost entirely to the solitude of his tricked-out Airstream trailer, he seems to want to connect as well, but his misreadings of his brother's bodied language and intentions make this difficult. Braxton is frank and playful and burns the character's bodied language with an easygoing fluidity, which makes, for an inch, The Accountant 2 is a blast funny, action-heavy, and packed with Affleck-Byrne romance. It's not flawless, but it's a sequel done right, ditching the previous film's baggage and doubling down on the stuff that worked, making for a wild ride. I am more than ready for a third. I just hope it doesn't take 9 years. Again, it's been a long and challenging road for director Eravan Noura. The way back, a warrior and Stara, banana Ika hair at the town, to G of The Accountant to a maid. The first film offered a gritty look at the life of neurodivergent accountant Christian Wolf Affleck, who crunches the numbers for some of the most dangerous criminals in the world. Generally well-received 2016, The Account Tamba earned a decent box office haul that was triple its production budget. Now O'Connor has returned to direct his first-ever sequel, expanding on the lives of Chris and his younger brother, Braxton Jon Bernthal, in a story that is a major tonal shift from the original A, which works incredibly well in its favor. The Accountant 2A 2025 finds Christian Wolf keeping a low profile in his dirty work while still attempting to carve a life out for himself. However, when the death of Treasury Department FinCEN director Raymond King J.K. Simmons brings agent Marie Beth Medina, Cynthia Addai-Robinson to Christian's door, a new puzzle reveals itself for the accountant to solve. This time, Chris has help from his estranged brother Braxton, who's recently been struggling to cope with his loneliness and need for belonging. Abil Jubakia Ozark returns to write the script, making the first movie feel like a setup for Christian's more heartfelt and humorous antics in the sequel from its numerically stylized title, which Gavin O'Connor said as via 2025 SXSW Film Festiva that he pronounces as the accountant squared to its dizzying and highly engaging opening sequence. You immediately get the sense that this sequel isn't merely going to repeat what worked before. On the contrary, the accountant Toa takes what's been established previously with Christian and his autism to create a compelling narrative that goes from a murder mystery to an international conspiracy involving immigrants and human trafficking. Additionally, the only lead in the case is a woman named Anna Atilde McCranes, played by Daniela Pineda, Netflix cowboy, Bebop, a Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, as she was the last one to speak to Raymond King before he died. The screenplay juggles many different characters and interweaving threads, arguably its biggest weakness. However, when that overly complicated narrative is used to tell a story about Christian's empathetic side as he works through his relationship with Braxton, it's hard to argue against it. Jon Bernthal, the Punisher at The Walking Dead, wasn't given much time to develop Bra before now, though he's allowed to use his gruff exterior to catch audiences off guard with a surprisingly light-hearted and charming performance. Brax is hilarious, endearing and violent when necessary, also bringing out his brother's more emotional side with sibling banter that can't be beaten. Ben Affleck is as sharp as ever as Christian Wolf, striking a delicate balance in portraying autism with care and sincerity. Like the first movie, Accountant 2A shows Chris trying to fit into a world with different-minded people without feeling patronized. The sequel goes the extra mile by including multiple autistic actors in its cast, such as Allison Robertson, who plays Christian's nonverbal partner in crime, Justine. The portrayal of this type of neurodivergency is just sensitive enough not to cross over into offensive or insulting territory. More importantly, autism never retreated as a hindrance to what's important in the mission at hand. Christian's eccentricities are instead used for multiple comical moments throughout the movie, each of which would have felt highly out of place. In the first Accountant, one example is his first scene in this film, wherein he hilariously rigs a speed dating algorithm to get the maximum number of matches, only to fail in the interactions he has in person with the woman. He swooned online, while there is definitely less book cooking and actual accounting this time around. Christian's psyche and how he perceives relationships with those around him are explored, which is equally as entertaining. The heart of Fathy, Accountant 2A, is brotherly love, as Braxton, throughout all his complaining and banter, is still there for his older brother. At the end of the day, the chemistry between Jon Bernthal and Ben Affleck is electric. Every scene with the two fighting side by side or with each other is an instant crowd leaser. You become so invested in the two mending their relationship that the emotional stakes of the hard-hitting action become much higher, elevating the already pristinely edited and choreographed gunfights and physical encounters. Unfortunately, Cynthia Addai-Robinson, The Rings of Power, Arrow as Agent Medina, is a conventional and passive character. Save for one intense sequence, she mostly gets Chris and Brax where the plot needs them to go. On the other hand, Daniela Pineda plays against type as a near-emotionless, silent, almost savant kind of killer. Pineda sells herself in the role and is a clear stat, and when alongside seasoned professionals like Affleck and Byrne, the trio delivers precise ferocity with every punch, kick, and gunshot. Moreover, cinematographer Seamus McGarve, The Avengers 2014's Godzilla ensures we don't miss a beat, as the timing of the visceral violence is just as on point as all the comedic moments seen in The Accountant 2. It's surprising how confidently and expertly the creative team behind this sequel shifted into a different tone than what many moviegoers might be expecting. But that's what makes it work so well, especially as a companion to the first account. And the movie, The Accountant 2A, divinely portrays Christian Wolff coming to terms with his past trauma and upbringing. By helping someone who is in a similar situation that he was in as a kid, if the first account, Tan film, was about learning who Chris was and how his father had him handle his neurodivergency, then this follow-up is about him moving forward despite those old wounds with everything from hilariously calculated line dancing to exhilarating shootouts on the border. How The Accountant 2A carefully handles its character arcs while delivering a poignant and timely message about the oppression of undocumented immigrants in America. Admittedly, how the script unnecessarily complicates this sensitive plot makes this installment harder to follow than the previous entry. This overindulgence is easy to overcome when everything else is firing on all cylinders. Though, The Accountant 2A is a bold, surprisingly funny, and ferocious action thriller that features Ben Affleck and Jon Bernthal at the top of their game. Gavin O'Connor's sequel is so unabashedly different from its predecessor, playing like a brother comedy at times, that it's hard not to enjoy. I can't remember a damn thing about The Accountant 2016, other than it starred Ben Affleck as artistic accountant Christian Wolff. I had to look up the character who consults for the Treasury. I had to look up the agency investigating money laundering. I know I've seen it, and I remember vaguely enjoying it. But beyond that, as Gandalf once said, I have no memory of this place. An ongoing problem these days. Hey, perhaps I've used up all the film storage space in my brain. Hey, or maybe I'm just getting older either. The Accountant 2A is a film I expected to vaguely enjoy in the same way as the original, and vaguely enjoy it, I did. That's perhaps a little unfair. Whilst watching, my enjoyment was more than vague. Christian Affleck returns this time, bringing his arranged hitman brother, Braxton Jon Bernthal. Their banter is what significantly elevates this film. Two scenes, one involving a criminal in the boot of a car, the other a brawl in a country and western bar, had me goofily and were almost worth the price of admission alone outside such predictable but entertaining sibling bonding. The plot is an overheated stew of viciously unpleasant criminals who meet viciously unpleasant and thoroughly deserved ends. It is set in motion by Mary Beth Medina, Cynthia Addai-Robinson, who brings in Christian to try and connect the dots between corpses and organized crime fraudsters. A few hacking moments involving Christian's nonverbal handler, Justine Allison Robertson, and her savant crew are entertaining. The horrific treatment of migrants is highlighted, as is the plight of the trafficked women. Mysterious assassin Anna Isle de Marines, Daniela Panetta-Flitzen, and out of the picture with a brief appearance by J.K. Simmons. Another plus point, although I wish they'd kept him around for longer. However, the appeal isn't the thriller shenanigans, but the film's entertaining celebration of all things neurodivergent. Another memorable scene near the beginning, involving Christian attempting speed dating, provides another big laugh, but crucially, the joke is never on the neurodivergent characters, but on those with a broken bar. The Accountant's best scenes have nothing to do with guns or hand-to-hand combat. In fact, when I saw the film last night at its SXSW world premiere, the audience was laughing along with it more than they were gasping when Jon Bernthal breaks a man's neck over a cinder block or a Beneful Echo smashes a gun into someone's face. It's not at all what I expected, but I think I loved every second of it 8 years after the original film. Gavin O'Connor revisits the story of Christian Wolff, an autistic accountant who balances the books for some of the world's most dangerous criminals. The Accountant was tepidly received upon release in 2016, but over the years, its reputation has grown as the kind of dumb dudes rock action movie you come across on Netflix and won't regret watching on Wednesday night. The accountant's setup is a bit convoluted, but the appeal of the film is in its story. The actual driving force behind much of the action in the film often feels like a different movie entirely. It involves a mysterious assassin, a missing family, a human trafficking ring, and a dead J.K. Simmons who shows up briefly in the film's first act before being unceremoniously killed off. As revealed in the trailer, Simmons gets a few good punches in before he departs, but the real reason he's back is so Marie Beth, Medina, Cynthia Addai-Robinson can find Chris and solve the murder of her former boss. Marie Beth was isolated from the main story in the first film, though she was hunting for Chris. They never actually met this time, though she's exposed to his less than legal methods of finding the truth. And when Chris's brother, Jon Bernthal, is brought on board the investigation, she's understandably spooked. This may all sound like serious stuff, and it sometimes is, but the dynamic between Rebeth Chris and Bra is as funny as it is dangerous. That's not why we're here. Though, the real reason The Accountant 2A was made is immediately apparent when Bernthal and Affleck reunite. Their chemistry is undeniable, with Affleck's soft-spoken, matter-of-fact character crashing against Bra's brash and violent nature. We spend more time with Bra and Chris hanging out, both solo and as a duo, than we do with him toting guns or throwing men over balconies. Chris tries speed dating with disastrous results. Brax overshares with a terrified woman. After he completes a contract, the brothers go line dancing, also to disastrous results. It's all very unexpected, and if you go into the film thinking you'll be getting a straightforward action movie, you may be disappointed. But if, like me, you enjoyed the first movie because of its idiosyncratic tone and didn't mind that it was a little light on action, then I have some good news for you. A few years ago, Accountant 2A looked like it wouldn't happen. O'Connor has talked at length about the sequels, the Lalea, and its journey to the big screen. But with that finally in the rearview mirror, and Affleck and Burnt Law on the road, again in the error stream, we've never been more back. O'Connor is already talking about The Accountant 3, a film he has affectionately dubbed Bread of the Accountant Cubed. Thanks to the second film's logo, all I know is I'd gladly watch Bernthal and Affleck on screen together as much as possible. Initially, I was almost dumbfounded by Al the Accountant 2, but its charms grew on me so fast that I couldn't help but love almost everything about it. Logic be damned. You can tell from the way the title is stylized on screen, and AI is a mathematical exponent like Alien Alba, that The Accountant 2 has removed the self-s seriousness from its predecessors. Otherwise delightful formula, Gavin O'Connor's sequel is a blast building on the story and relationships of 2016's The Account Tanta to reveal a touching, hilarious portrait of froth brotherhood within a charged and politically relevant plot. All the while, it leans full tilt into a goofy setup that's executed with utter confidence. Christian Wolf Ben Affleck, aka The Accountant, is a savant number cruncher for the mob and part-time vigilante gunman whose autism is gently approached and realistically performed, but framed as though it worries superpower. There's less bean counting in The Accountant 2, but far more blood and bullets, starting with an opening scene in which former Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, or FinCEN, director Raymond King J.K. Simmons is gunned down while working a case in secret. Once the Commissioner Gordon to The Accountant's Batman may fitting, as Affleck and Simmons have since played that dynamic in the DC Extended University, King has only been following leads in which he's emotionally invested. His death leaves behind an intricate puzzle for Wolf to solve, alongside King's Treasury Department successor, the returning Marie Beth, Medina, Cynthia Addai-Robinson. The case that got King killed opens up a web of human trafficking between Central America and the southern U.S., exposing the ways in which undocumented immigrants who have little legal recourse are brutally exploited, where the first film is mostly unsentimental about its central plot, which revolved around a robotics firm. The Accountant 2 conjures immense melodrama and the mystery of King's death. But as somber as the story seems at first blush, it's also peppered with wildly amusing moments of character that begins with Wolf's reintroduction, during which he games a speed dating algorithm by sprucing up his profile in all the right ways, only to botch every face-to-face encounter. It's the perfect kind of silly placing. Wolf's isolation front and center while setting up his impending reunion with his estranged brother, fellow contract killer Braxton Jon Bernthal, whose help he seeks to solve King's murder. Also assisting Wolf is his returning remote, technologically savvy assistant, Justine Allison Robertson, replacing Allison Rudd from the first film, a nonverbal resident of a Mansionite academy for young autistic students. She has her own legion of hackers in training this time, Atilda Professor Rexay, who she even quotes at one point. Like I said, perfectly silly, even if the portrayal of neurodivergence constantly threatens to tip, but never fully does, into offensiveness. A mysterious, scarily capable assassin, known only as Ana Isle de Mrenes, Daniela Pineda, seems to somehow be involved in King's case, but the accountant whose lopsided structure ensures that she disappears for lengthy periods. However, the layers it reveals to her seemingly single-minded character do, where no matter how many conveniences cause its jigsaw pieces to click into place, the result is no less entertaining. Just like the accountant, whose heightened tone and reliance on tried-and-true storytelling devices, enormous coincidences, long-lost family, connections wouldn't feel out of place in a Bollywood movie. The sequel, similarly, runs a crowd-pleasing gamut. The action is capable and clear, the plot, while complicated in structure, takes the characters to interesting places both geographically and emotionally. The comedy is fine-tuned, and most importantly, entirely character and performance-based things simmer on a medium flame until Burnt shows up and instantly sets the screen ablaze. An actor long compared to Robert De Niro, he finally gets his own "you talking to me" moment in The Accountant 2, which paves the path for Braxton's surprising vulnerability. He's a lost, lonely soul who just wants his older brother's friendship. Affleck, despite a voice that seems more influenced by a Simpsons comic book this time around, returns seamlessly to the role of Wolf, having retreated almost entirely to the solitude of his tricked-out Airstream trailer. He seems to want to connect as well, but his misreadings of make this difficult. Braxton is frank and playful, and Burnham views the character's bodied language with an easygoing fluidity, which makes for an enchantingly funny contrast with Wolf's unwavering stiffness. The clashes between the brothers are the movie's heart and soul. This especially comes to light during their downtime from vigilantism and from Medina's disapproval of their methods. One scene in an LA Square dancing bar is a particular delight. Between Braxton's eagerness to throw hands and Wolf's wonderfully roundabout methods of flirtation, which involves him calculating his way onto the dance floor. It's a sequence that demonstrates Akinor understanding that movement and character are intrinsically bound, and in action, cinema, you can't really have one without building up the other. Let me say, right up top, that I quite like 2016's The Accountant. It might have been a hair today, God tomorrow, action flick for a fair number of the viewers, but I have an odd personal connection to it, because it was the very last movie I saw in theaters before leaving my home state of Arizona for a new life in Austin, Texas. I say all of this to make a point that I care about the original movie more than the average enjoyer of action cinema. So believe me when I tell you that the long-awaited The Account, and 2 delivers the goods director Gavin O'Connor as reunited with Ben Affleck, who once again headlines the sequel as the mysterious Christian Wolf, an autistic man who happens to also be an assassin with a code Okakinor, and Affleck, despite first tackling the concept nearly a decade ago, didn't skip a beat with this reunion. After seeing the film's world premiere at SXSW, to my eye, this is a funnier, more confidently directed, wholly entertaining sequel that is surprisingly not devoid of heart. It improves on its predecessor in every way. The sequel once again centers on Christian Wolf Affleck, a man with the talent for solving complex problems. When an old friend is murdered, he leaves behind a cryptic message that unites Wolf with an unexpected ally. As Treasury Deputy Director Marie Beth Medina, Cynthia Addai-Robinson. Together, they must work to solve a bizarre and multi-layered case. Wolf, needing help, recruits his arranged brother Brax Jon Bernthal. They uncover a deadly conspiracy and put themselves in the crosshairs of ruthless killers with secrets to hide. The Accountant was a successful action movie that did well both in theaters and on home video. In the days of old, it's the kind of movie that any studio would have rushed to make a sequel to. In the years since the original came out, though, much has changed. Hollywood suffered a pandemic. Streaming has become the dominant force and moved egoing habits. Be seemingly been permanently Salvador and family who migrated to the United States' final meeting took place in a grungy Los Angeles bar with a curious stranger he calls Ana Ailde de Marines, Daniela Pineda. The reasons that King accepted this job are vaguely addressed, but ultimately don't withstand any serious analytical pressure when the police call King's professional heir, Beth Medina, Cynthia Addai-Robinson. She's not sure how to connect the dots. A final message from King instructs the by-the-books director to find Christian Wolf. Marie Beth, still uncomfortable with the arrangement between her department and the felonious accountant, does so reluctantly do an early review of the case by Christian. And Mary Beth reveals that King's work was a small fraction of a broader conspiracy that involves people desperate to remain unknown and need of backup. Christian phones barracks. The siblings haven't talked since. Christian told his younger brother that he would reach out at the end of Faith the Accountant. Wounds of their fractured relationship unattended. Stillbra flies from Berlin to Los Angeles and partners with Christian to figure out who wanted King dead. Christian Murray. Beth and Brax's investigation lead them into the seedy underbelly of LA, where they encounter a world that exploits and profits off the desperation of undocumented people. The puzzle at the center of Fad Count and a 2A matters in so far as the film needs a narrative propellant. But Bernthal and Affleck are the real draw, and Okakinor knows this. He uses any opportunity to get the brothers talking and follows each major development in this fictional case with a moment of brotherly bonding. Christian and Bra, estranged for nearly a decade for reasons that still aren't entirely clear, find their way back to one another through a series of charming encounters. They share beers on the roof of the Airstream line, dance at a local bar, and reflect on the past while setting up traps for their enemies. These are the brightest scenes in The Accountant 2A because of Affleck and Bernthal's easy chemistry and both actors' abilities to root the seemingly surface-level arguments in their characters. Psychic traumas. The Accountant 2A might present a more jovial tone, but its universe is built on pretty dark themes. A familiarity with Christian's character arena of The Accountant makes his development in the sequel more satisfying to watch. Although the portrayal of a high-functioning autistic person can still feel clumsy and at times disappointingly cartoonish, Christian celebrates his difference. Even Marina the Accountant too. This is underscored by an exaggerated but wholesome thread about how Justine Allison Wright, Christian's partner who has nonverbal autism, and Christian involve the students at the well-funded Harvard Neuroscience Academy. It's all very Bruce Wayne meets Professor Rex. Christian's also committed to bettering his relationships with people, taking social risks that he previously might have avoided. It's a shame that Bra isn't afforded an equally strong arc while Bernthal proves himself to be a scene stealer. Brack occasionally verges on being one-note part of this can be attributed to the intricacy of O'Connor and Duke's twisty screenplay. The connecting web of relationships, motives, and money can be dizzying, especially with the freewheeling geographic and temporal part. Though O'Connor's direction is disciplined, he wrings humor from nearly every moment by staging action scenes as blunt as Christian's commentary and employing transitions as precise as the accountant's aim. And while this critic would have welcomed more restraint in the violence, which can have an enduring effect, fans of the first film will find plenty to admire and root for in this entertaining fraternal union. When a king dies, his unresolved plans are left for others to finish, and when retired Treasury Director King is suddenly assassinated, that job goes to the new director Marie Betham Medina. His death comes as a shock, and she's left with little to go. We're not just a jumbled wall full of seemingly unrelated pictures and files. But just before he died, he scrolled a frantic message on his arm. Find the accountant. It's a cryptic instruction, but Ray's left behind enough clues to point Mary Beth in the right direction. And it's not long before said accountant Christian Wolf finds a her. It's not her first time dealing with Christian, the criminal number savant known for working the balances of corporations and drug cartels alike. And despite how much she hates admitting it, Marie Beth knows she'll need his help to solve Ray's unfinished case. But there's a reason couldn't solve his investigation, and that someone won't take kindly to his successor picking the case back up. Positive elements, as we noted in our review of the first film. In this franchise, Christian isn't exactly a good guy. He's more in the realm of muscle and human calculator for hire, since his clients can jump between corporation and warlord on a whim. However, Keto has to risk his life to save children from being murdered, and he continues to support a charity with the money he earns, and his brother Braxton assists him in these ventures. 2. Speaking of Braxton, the two brothers slowly rebuild their strained relationship throughout the film. Despite their differences, they learn how to connect with each other again. Spiritual elements. Someone tells a speed dating group, Godspeed, but then quickly clarifies that his blessing was non-denominational. A man prays before his meal. Sexual romantic content. Braxton hires a trio of prostitutes to obtain some information. They're dressed in short skirts and shirts that expose cleavage. A woman's dress exposes the side of her breast. Braxton talks on the phone, dressed in only tight underwear for a long time, and a woman dances in revealing shorts. A man showers, though nothing critical is seen, and later walks around in a towel. Christian hijacks a speed dating event to get the most matches, though. He struggles to interest any of the women. Someone describes the scene like something out of one of those. Let's catch us a pervert shows violent content. One plot line here includes a gang of criminals hoping to load a group of young children into a mass grave to kill them. They're stopped before this can occur. We hear discussions about human trafficking, and we meet some women who have been forced into prostitution by powerful men. It's said that these men also abuse the woman. 2. A woman narrowly escapes from a man who has pinned her to the ground, apparently planning to sexually assault her over the course of the film. Dozens upon dozens of people, civilian and criminal alike, suddenly discover what's waiting for them in the afterlife. They're dispatched primarily via a bullet or two in a burst of blood. Some are executed, but others require a bit more violence. To take down, they're beaten, stabbed, and strangled to death. One person has his neck broken when Braxton stomps on the man's head. We also see pictures of some grisly murder scenes. A man gets struck and killed by a car. We see a pit filled With bodies, we see a photo of a man with a now dead rat shoved deeply into his mouth, killed when it was forced into his mouth, alive to torture him. Others don't die, but do suffer grievous injuries. A woman flung from her car in an accident requires extensive surgery to save her. Another woman gets kicked and stabbed. Christian tortures a man for information by dislocating his shoulder. One sorry? Sap gets stabbed with a pen through his pants to the genitals. Someone advocates cutting out a man's eye and threatening to take the second one. Or profane language we hear about 55 words, including a handful paired with mother. We hear the sword 8 times. Other crudities include a bossy, hand peas, and douchebag. We hear a crude slang term for the female anatomy god's name is used in vain about 10 times, including 7 instances in which it is paired. With Dan, Jesus' name is likewise used in vain. 3 times, we see a crude hand, gesture, drug, alcohol content. There's a reference to drug cartels and drug smuggling. People drink beer and wine. The song Copperhead Road, which is about bootlegging moonshine and growing marijuana, plays during a line dance. People smoke cigarettes. 2 people resolve to get drunk, and we meet an inebriated man. Other note for the elements. Christian's extensive network of information is managed by a group of neurodivergent children with Savin syndrome. They use their skills to hack into government and private files to obtain data necessary for Christian's work. Conclusion: is there anything better in this world than punching it explicit who had it coming? Asked Braxton, reminiscing merrily about sending 3 men flying through a bar's window. The answer you'd take away from the account and the series is a definitive number, and quite honestly, it would be really easy for me to just copy and paste our conclusion for the first film here. Its sequel is violent popcorn fare, whose only massage is a sit-down and watch Ben Affleck shoot people for a while, but whereas the first movie had him going at it alone, this time he's got his brother, the hitman Braxton. It's a bit ironic then that the best parts of the movie are when Christian and Braxton take their fingers off the trigger. Jon Bernthal's brotherly characters plays a much bigger role in this sequel than he did in the first, and the duo's relationship makes for some of the best, if overly crudia moments of the story. But those moments don't last long, especially when unfired bullets have yet to be shot, and still more grim moments await, including some extremely dark ones involving human trafficking and an attempt to slaughter a group of young children. Ultimately, Accountant 2A showcases a man far more likely to crunch a body than a number, and those issues likely mean this action thriller won't turn a profit in your household. There are a few reasons to revisit up The Accountant at a bog-standard 2016 thriller, whose only distinguishing feature was the fact that Ben Affleck's protagonist was explicitly characterized as autistic. But if you were to revisit it, surely it would be to retool the character to better reflect the neurodivergent experience in this first film. We're told that when Christian Wolf Affleck was diagnosed as a child, his father's immediate response was to train both him and his brother, Jon Bernthal's Braxton, in the Indonesian martial art of pencakulad, leading the latter to become a hitman and the former an accountant for criminals and terrorists. It was, realistically, about as good as the autistic community could hope for from mainstream film. Christian adhered to the classic autistic savant trope, his mathematical skills boosted to the point he's essentially a superhero. While of course being portrayed by a neurotypical actor yet builder, Buck's script was at least sensitive to and occasionally realistic in its depiction of how autism shapes Christian's daily life and relationships, depicting him not as deliberately aloof, but as someone desperately trying to connect to a world that communicates by different means. And Affleck, to his credit, never treated the role as caricature or BA, as a go-damn action hero. The accountant whose response to all this tells us a lot about the state of disability representation in cinema. On the one hand, an autistic actor, Allison Robertson, has been cast in the role of Justine, Christian's Hackerid, and a nonverbal autistic woman. That specific kind of representation is, other hand, her character is the head of what can only be described as Charles Xavier's School for Gifted Autistics, an X-Men-style academy in which a child army sits at computer keyboards and hacks drones and web cameras purely for Christian's benefit. This time around, no one in the film can actually bring themselves to say. The word autistic Christian alludes to my condition, my people, etc., etc. It's a patently ridiculous element of a sequel whose only move is to amp up everything that was ridiculous about its predecessor, and maybe it'd all be easier to laugh off if the U.S. Health Secretary hadn't just called autism an epidemic in need of elimination. But while the near-decade delay in The Accountant 2's release comes with a variety of excuses, Co-Strike's regime changes at Warner Brothers, the bigger crisis at the heart of the film is its inability to justify why we should have come back here in the first place. Returning writer-director team Dubuque and Gavin O'Connor have refitted their goofy but serious first film to become a violent knockabout buddy comedy, bringing back Burns Braxton and rewriting his character, so he's now nothing but a human peacock. He struts around his hotel room in his underwear, hollering down the phone about a corgi puppy. He monologues about the Wizard of Oza while eating ice cream in front of a woman he's holding hostage. He's it now, for narrative convenience, a cocker, opposite to Christian's methodical introvert, out on the trail of a missing immigrant family. The brothers smash heads, fire guns, and bicker their way through a vague and insensitively handled plot line about cartel-backed human traffickers. Goes to a speed dating event. At another, he does some line dancing. It's teetering, right on the edge of seeing his autism as nothing more than a punchline after nearly 10 years. Can anyone really call The Accountant 2A progress? It's rare that an action thriller ignores the action as much. Also, The Accountant 2A does, but there will be periods of time in the film when you wonder when the fighting might happen. There are bursts of action and some impressive sequences, but for a film franchise that should be hanging its hat on these types of set pieces, there simply aren't very many. In the finale, we'll leave you a bit unsatisfied in that regard. What we do get a lot of in the film is character stuff, which is all well and good. Stories don't work without it, but the balance feels off. Ben Affleck's Christian Wolf simply isn't that interesting this time around, and Affleck's still Tay Forrest Gumpa meets a Rain Mono performance is a lot better, and not in a good way. There is that strange thing he's doing with his voice that doesn't feel as consistent, and only really works. When Jon Bernthal's more dynamic, Braxton mocks it. Affleck's performance felt smoother the first time around, as it was new to us. This time, it gets repetitive, and we keep expecting something more. The franchise is set up to be about the adventures of odd couple heroic mercenary brothers, Brax and Chris, who combine violence with super genius to save those in need. This could be really fun. Dua Bernthal does such a good job at carrying the comedy action and even drama in the scenes between the two men that you at times forget how long it's been since there was a strong set piece. The two of them play off each other well, and you can see real potential for another movie or more beyond that. So long as the narrative and the action are there to support the two stars in The Accountant 2. They, frankly, aren't the film's problems, lie in a combination of its plot and the somewhat vanilla nature of the action. We do get the story surely bites off more than it can chew, setting up a complex web of crimes tracing back to a missing person case related to a family's ill-fated border crossing. The mother of the family becomes more deeply connected to other threads of the plot in ways that are just a bit silly, but no spoilers. Here, in the end, The heroic brothers team up to save the day and find a resolution to their challenge relationship. If you enjoy light banter, problem solving, and spurts of gunplay, The Accountant 2A delivers at the most basic level. If you're the type of person who either needs more action or who gets frustrated by plot devices that ask a bit too much in terms of suspension of disbelief, it's likely this one will leave you frustrated. Burnt really does crash it as Braxton, while Affleck's return to Wolf leaves something to be desired. The rest of the cast includes some new characters as well as returns from the first entry in the series. Cynthia Addai-Robinson is back as Marie Beth Medina, who has a critical role in the story. This time, Affleck himself even referred to her as being the protagonist of the story, which might be part of why his character seems somewhat off. In the proceedings, Addai-Robinson does a solid enough job without a ton of meat on the bone, her main character issues seeming to be the search for a decent desk chair. J.K. Simmons returns as Ray King, and his role is pivotal to the film's jumping-off point. Daniela Panetta joins a cast as a critical badass assassin character who occupies a bit of a gray area. The action sequences allow for all the players to get their hands dirty, but the fighting is all a bit too familiar. There aren't set pieces or sequences that take us into an experience we haven't had before, and the stakes feel pretty low until the final confrontation. When innocents are involved, great action movies tend to combine innovative set pieces with just enough character threads to create compelling drama and stakes. We care about the balance between all those things is both tricky and expensive. But when it works, as in the John Wick franchise, it works so well that audiences keep coming back for more. It certainly worked in The Accountant, but it feels like this attempt to recapture the magic or build on its foundation flounders. That said, there is something genuine in the dynamic between Bernthal and Affleck, which leaves plenty of room for further exploration, development, and adventure. Should the filmmakers, studios, and audiences all combine to demand more with a better storyline and more action behind them, this could be quite the dynamic duo. A production of Artists Equity, 51 Entertainment Zero, Gravity Management, and Film Tribe at The Accountant 2A will be in theaters April 25th, 2025 from Amazon. MGM Studios, there's a special April 16th screening for Tax Day. Find more information here. What If Rain Man Was Batman sounds like the pitch for a comedy sketch that would have absolutely slayed in the summer of 1989. So it's worth remembering that The Accountant, the 2016 action thriller that ran with that premise, was merely a preposterous crock and not some outdated outrage. What kept the film from teetering out of silliness into offensiveness was unexpectedly a Ben Affleck's performance as Christian Wolf, an autistic bookkeeper with a calculator for a brain. And some information about it. How do you like our today's video? Please let us know by commenting. And if you like this video, please like it, share it, and forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.